Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's my morning. I have no idea what time it is. But I know it's at night. And I forgot to say that before in my videos. Okay, so I said I was going to finish reading the chapter in Paul. I forgot. I had a dream about this book, Paul. This book was in my dream, so I have to read, like, this whole book. Okay, so I forgot where I was. I said I was going to finish reading the rest of this chapter. It's on page 100. And I'm just going to start on page 100. I have no idea if you can see that. But the Paul, a man of grace and grit, finding contentment in God's sufficient grace. So I'm going to start on page 100 because I forgot where I left off. Okay. So page 100 of chapter 7, finding contentment in God's sufficient grace. Okay. I see an interesting tension here. While Satan punched and pounded the apostles' resolve, the Lord's purpose was to humble him, to keep him from exalting himself. Pride doesn't reside in the hearts of the broken. This split apart the wounded, the anguished of the soul. Many years ago, I read these words. Pain plants the flag of reality in the fortress of a rebel heart. Mothers and fathers keeping vigil in the leukemia ward of a children's hospital do not wrestle with issues of pride. They are humbled to the point of despair. Now, I need to point out that I am not qualified to give you the intimate details of how Saul's thorn affected him. However, he does confess that he begged the Lord on 3 separate occasions to remove it from him. Verse 8. And you know what? We would have done the same. You and I would have prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and begged for relief. Father, please take away this thorn. Lord, I beg of you, remove it. Take this pain away from me. That was Saul's response. I see amazing transparency written in those lines. The world needs more followers of Christ who embrace pain and hardships rather than deny it. How helpful for us to see all this as God's plan to keep us humble. That can't be taught in Bible colleges or seminaries. Those lessons are learned in the harsh realities of life, what people of prayer we would become, how often we would turn to Him, how fully we would lean on Him, and what insights we would glean. That is precisely what happened to Saul, as Saul turned again and again to his Lord. God gave an answer he never expected. A grace that won't let go. And what was that answer? God answered no, but He offered something far better than relief, sufficient grace. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. That's where this man of grace and grit got his remarkable perspective on human weaknesses. It came as an answer to his thrice-repeated plea for the Lord to remove the thorn. I suppose we could call this thorn in the flesh theology. Saul didn't make that up while playing around with clever words and creative expressions. He lived it. He received that message from the Lord. No was God's final answer to his prayer for deliverance from suffering. This is a good time to correct faulty thinking. It is not always God's will that you be healed. It is not always the Father's plan to relieve the pressure. Our happiness is not God's chief aim. He doesn't have a wonderful, meaning, comfortable plan for everybody's life. Not from a human perspective. Often his plan is nowhere near wonderful. As with Saul, his answer is not what we prayed and hoped for. But remembering that he is forming us more and more into the image of his Son, it helps us understand his answers is based on his long-range plan, not our immediate relief. Thankfully, in the midst of that suffering, he gently whispers, "My grace is sufficient for you." As with Saul, his grace supplies more than we need to endure whatever it is that threatens to undo us. Let me amplify that thought. His grace is more sufficient than your strength. His grace is more sufficient than the advice of any trained counselor or close friend, though God uses both. His grace is sufficient to carry you through whatever your own unique thorn may be. His grace, that's the ticket. Would you like to know why? Because power... because power is perfected in weakness. What an amazing statement from the Lord. And all this time, we thought power was perfected in success. We've been taught all our lives that it is achievement that makes us strong. No. 1,000 times no. Those things make us proud and self-sufficient and independent. The painful thorns make us weak. But the good news is this. When we are weak, he pours his strength into us, which gives an entirely new perspective on pain and suffering, hardship and pressure. Those stresses and strains drive us to our knees. It's at that point our God comes through. And so, let's stop looking for someone or something to blame. Let's cease the incessant building of straw men only to set them on fire, so we can say, aha, that's the reason my misery is so great. Don't go there, my friend. Suffering is not about identifying the cause. It's about focusing on the response. I plead with you, do not miss that. It's about willingly accepting God's plan, no matter what the circumstance. It's about finding contentment in God's grace, regardless. Okay, so this is Charles R. Swindoll. He wrote this book, I think. So evidently he's the one that's saying this. So I'm gonna stop there, and so this video isn't that long, and then we'll get back to reading the rest of chapter 7, Finding Contentment in God's Grace. Charles Swindoll. Okay, so... Oh, thank you for watching.